Good morning and welcome to the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization on this May 9th, 2019 in the Space Coast, starting at 8:30. It's a little unusual today, but we'll plug along. Next is we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak, please fill out a card, and you can do that over here. And when the item is being heard, you're welcome to come up to the microphone. Next is item 3 is the 2018 Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Advisory Committee Awards. This is real exciting. Welcome, Kim Smith. And we do this every year, and I look forward to doing this.
Yes, me too. This is always one of my favorite meeting days. As you know, the TPO has a very well recognized and very robust bicycle safety initiative and education, but we know that we can't do it without help. So that's what these awards are about. It gives us a chance to award those partners that help us further initiatives and education for bicyclists and pedestrians, trying to make Brevard County a little safer for them. So, with that being said, I'd like to invite Valerie Harville and Sarah and Cindy Hoskins up, please. Hoskin. I keep saying that S. So we are very privileged today to have Valerie Harville. I don't know those of you that remember, but she's really the reason we have our school-based program. She was very instrumental in getting that started 20 plus years ago, and the award is named after her, so we're happy to have her here today. Cindy is our award recipient this year. She is the PE teacher at Holland Elementary. She does incredible work. She gets the trailer. She has her husband come out and help keep an eye on the bikes when the trailer gets to her school. We always appreciate that when the husbands or family members come out and help with the maintenance. But she participates in Bike to School Day, Walk to School Day. Recently, I dropped her off a whole bunch of helmets so she can make sure all of her students are wearing helmets and doing the things they are supposed to do. So it is our pleasure to award the Valerie Harville Education Award to Cindy Hoskin. Next, I would like to invite Deputy Chief Hutchinson and Lieutenant Wright from Titusville PD up. The award winner in the enforcement category this year is obviously Titusville PD. Titusville at the beginning of this particular school year was very active in enforcing speeds and other violations in school zones. They have also been out to Imperial States Elementary and done a community ride with the students there when they were doing their bike program. And just as early as yesterday, there are pictures on Facebook that you can find of them out participating on Bike to School Day with the kids in the Titusville area. So we offer congratulations to the Titusville Police Department. All right, the Encouragement Award. This is our heavy category this year. I'd like to invite Maggie Dickinson, Rethink Your Commute, that would be Courtney and Chris, and Charlene Neuterman to come up, please. So, Maggie runs Get Healthy Brevard, which I know Mayor Meehan knows all about Mayor's Fitness Challenge, and some of you others may also as well. They are the leading organization behind organizing that here in Brevard, and of course that's an initiative to encourage people to live a healthier lifestyle, to get out in their community, and that involves a lot of walks and bikes and being out, so we congratulate them for all of their efforts. Thank you. Courtney Reynolds and Chris Mahoney, did I get that right? Okay, are from Rethink Your Commute. They're very involved in the Central Florida area as well as Brevard County. They've been very beneficial in helping us with our transit summit. I know I attended at least one cycle savvy class with Courtney in the city of Titusville. They've done helmet fits, and they've started doing bike to work days, which we're very appreciative of them doing that. It's something we had wanted to get going here, so we're happy that they do that. So we offer them our congratulations as well. And then Charlene Nuderman with the City of Cocoa was very instrumental when we did our Florida Avenue Complete Streets. She was very involved and very helpful on that project. She also was very helpful when the BPAC went out and did a walking workshop on that same corridor to really look at the types of things that can be done and the improvements. And she was very beneficial in planning and organizing our meeting for our Bike Ped Master Plan update. So we offer her congratulations as well. All right. So next I would invite up our representatives from the Brevard County Fire Rescue. This is actually a new category that we're extremely excited about. We got a nomination from a couple people about an incident that happened in Cape Canaveral last year. A gentleman was hit while riding his bicycle on Ridgeway. He sustained severe injuries. But the nomination came in that through the efforts of Rescue 60 and some of the other responders that were there, they believe he's still here today because of the calls they made on scene. So these gentlemen are getting our first ever First Responder Award, and that's Rescue 60 out of Cape Canaveral. All right, the Engineering Award, I'd like to invite Michael McGrew up. Michael McGrew, Sarah just could not say enough good about him. He was involved in both phases of the Zoo Trail construction. He was project manager on the second phase, and Sarah said his attention to detail and the little things he did really made the difference in that project. And if you haven't been out to the Zoo Trail, I know you've heard us say it before, go out, do yourself a favor, and take a walk on the Zoo Trail, because it is a beautiful, beautiful facility that Brevard County can be very proud of. And obviously Mike was a big part of that.
All right.
All right, and then our next award is our Lifetime Achievement Award. You know, we don't always have these. Of course, it's the Robert Comm Lifetime Achievement Award, and that's going to go to Bob Wilbur. When I ask for justification or a little documentation on what Mr. Wilbur does and why he was worthy, I got pages and pages and pages and pages of why this gentleman is worthy and what he has done for bicycling and hiking here in Brevard County. He first moved to Malabar in 1995, immediately jumped in and got to work on a planning and zoning committee and then a greenways and trails committee. He was very instrumental on work on the South Brevard Out Tuttle Trail, including using his own resources and his own time to make improvements to the trail and a lot of the trailheads down there. And he's also, it's not uncommon to see him show up at a meeting anywhere in Brevard County and advocate for setting aside lands so that future generations are able to walk and bike and enjoy wildlife and that kind of thing. So he has been working a very long time at a lot of great initiatives, and I would encourage you to read his full write-up. It's in your packet, as well as all the other recipients, if you want to see a little bit more about why they are extremely worthy for the awards they're getting today. So congratulations to Mr. Wilbur. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for Kim? All right, congratulations to everyone. That's great. Item 4A is Executive Director's Report. Georgiana.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. In your agenda, Abby has prepared a public engagement summary that lists all activities for the entire 2018 calendar year. And it's really a at-a-glance look at all the things that we've been up to from a public engagement standpoint. We've participated in over 125 events. A lot of those events are attributed to Kim's participation in the Bicycle Rodeo's school and community events, but we really do our best to try and get out there. We've reached over 682 users via social media. We've completed a website facelift, and we've also, we have a platform on Nextdoor that we use to share public meetings and post surveys, and we're getting a lot of really good feedback, a lot of questions from that website as well. So it's a way for us to reach out to the public in a more interactive way. You also have our strategic plans to see what staff has been up to this quarter. Just to give you a quick legislative update, of course you know session is over, and it looks like our legislators decided to make texting while driving a primary offense. So if you get caught, that'll be a $30 fine. If you get caught a second time, that would be a $60 fine. You can still use your phones at stoplights, so that means we will still be waiting for those people too busy typing to notice that the light has turned green. There's also added language about school and construction zones that now requires drivers to use hands-free devices if they want to talk on their phones, so that's really good. So the state will conduct an educational campaign and start ticketing January of 2020. So I think this is a step in the right direction because as we all know, distracted driving is very, very dangerous. There's also a bill allowing autonomous vehicles to self-operate on Florida's roadways that's headed to the governor, and this means that there does not need to be a human in the vehicle that operates autonomously. So your future Lyft or Uber may not have a driver. So that should be interesting as we go into a new age. So just for situational awareness, we have provided you a copy of the Board of County Commissioners resolution supporting Senator Mayfield's efforts to ensure safe passenger rail systems in Florida. Specifically, the resolution references the Florida Passenger Rail System Study and that DOT developed some regulations governing the higher speed passenger trains. So, of course, the current concern is about safety, and we all know that is extremely important. On that note, we do have Mr. Rusty Roberts here with Virgin Trains USA, who will be discussing some safety operations, among other things. So we look forward to that presentation. I also wanted to give you a real quick update on the 528 modeling flushing study that we talked about several months back. DOT has still not received responses to their questions concerning the FIT model. The port has been working with Dr. Zarillo on finalizing that information, so I think it is imminent, it is coming, but we're not reaching a conclusion as expeditiously as we had hoped. DOT has now officially put the design on hold, and they have requested a meeting with the TPO, the port, and Brevard County staff to discuss how we're going to move forward, and they have given us a timeline. They'd like a decision by July 1st. Now, we don't meet in June, so it's going to be difficult for us to come back to the board to discuss that, so we can certainly talk to the district about that and see if we can have a little bit more time. But I do think it would be important for all the agencies to get together at the table and just discuss, what the potential impacts could be. Make sure we're talking the same language, where we're coming from, and I think that would be, very beneficial for all of us. So stay tuned about that because we do need to make a decision sooner rather than later. And then finally, I just would like to congratulate Councilmember Minus and Councilmember Young on completing the MPOAC Weekend Institute. You spent a weekend learning about what MPOs do and why we exist, and we appreciate that so much. And I know Deputy Mayor Anderson is going to be attending, I think, at the end of the month. So we appreciate you so much taking the time to do that and learning more about the organization. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Georgiana? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to item 4B, which is the Technical Advisory and Citizens Advisory Committee, the TAC-CAC report. Georgiana.
All right. The TAC-CAC met on Monday, and you have before you a summary of actions on the handout at your place. The TAC-CAC did recommend that the TPO approve the March 11th TAC-CAC meeting minutes, the ITS Master Plan Scope of Services, a scope of services for the Safe Routes Analysis, the 2018 State of the System Scope of Services, and also the Minton Road Feasibility Study Scope of Services. So we're going to be pretty busy here coming up soon. They also approved the fiscal year 19 through 23 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment and the Central Florida MPO Alliance 2020 Regional Priorities. In your package, you also have the TAC-CAC attendance record. And so we would just like to acknowledge receipt of the draft TAC-CAC meeting minutes of March 11th.
Okay.
So that could be a motion to
Okay.
acknowledge
All
it.
right, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
All right. All right, I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Lober, second by Ms. Young. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And I vote aye, and the motion passes. Very good. Item 4C, Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Advisory Committee, and that would be the report, and that would be Sarah Crum.
I messed up and hit the thing. Good morning, I'm Sarah Crum. I'm the Multimodal Program Specialist with the Space Coast TPO. The BPAC met on March 25th, 2019. They received the same RRFB presentation that you had, as well as they also had approved the BPAC award nominations that we just saw. As many of you know, in March, we finished up our Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan public meeting. There was a total of 6 of them. I'd like to give a big thank you to Space Coast Area Transit for coming out to every single one of those meetings and setting up an informational table, as well as also to the City of Cape Canaveral, the City of Melbourne, City of Cocoa, City of Melbourne Beach, Brevard County EEL Program, and the City of Palm Bay for hosting us during those meetings. There's a short summary included in your agenda package. As you can see, we had 202 attendees. The majority of them heard about the meetings via social media or email, so it was obviously a big technological push that got them to come out. And if you look at the second page, you can see some of the common comments that we received. These 5 comments were ones that were seen at every single meeting. It didn't matter what location we were at. It was just very common that these ones rose to the top. So they would be need for bicycle and pedestrian facilities on the bridges and causeways. State Road 528 and 520 were specifically called out several times. North Merritt Island needs bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Better enforcement of laws for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, so all users. More multi-use trails. They were seen as a huge community asset, a benefit, a safe route. It was very, very vocally spoken that our citizens want to see more trails out there. And then finally, fill in the sidewalk gaps on US 1 and State Road A1A. Finally, I wanted to let you know, because we're not meeting next month, that June is National Trails Month. We have been working with Space Coast Government TV in Brevard County, Parks and Recreation, to create short videos, just quickie little 1-minute videos for each of the showcase trails. So we completed them as of yesterday, and they will be featured in our social media and our newsletters next month. So look out for them, share them, enjoy them, and hopefully at a future meeting we can also air them here. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Crum? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Crum. Next will be under reports 4D, Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT report, and Kelly Smith will be here to give us that report. I understand Jamie is on vacation.
She is enjoying some sunshine in Key West this
All right.
week, so
Very
we
good.
are all a little jealous of her
Yes,
much-deserved vacation. In your packet, she provided the material, so if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them for you or take them back.
All right, Ms. Smith, any questions for Ms. Smith? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
And tell Jamie we envy her, for sure. All right, so item number 5 is the consent agenda, and that is going to be reported by Georgiana.
I'll read the consent agenda aloud for the record, and you can consider adopting the actions in one motion if you so choose. 5A is the TPO Governing Board minutes of March the 14th, 2019. 5B is committee appointments, and we do have an add-on. The Town of Indian Atlantic is appointing Mr. Michael Casey as the new Technical Advisory Committee member, so we would like to add that on if we could. 5C is Finance and Budget, and we have 3 items on the agenda. The first is the 2019 operating budget. It's our quarterly report. We also have 2 UPWP amendments. The first one is we're just shifting around some carry-forward funds to different work tasks so that the funds could be used beginning July 1 on several items of the long-range plan and updating the bike ped mobility plan. We need a little more money for that. And the other amendment is a reallocation of some of our funding to the appropriate tasks so we can develop a Vision Zero program, which we're going to come to you and discuss in July and get approval for that. So that's why we're shifting some of our funding around in the UPWP. Number 3 is contract renewal of auditing services agreement. 5D is the ITS master plan scope of services. 5E is the safe routes analysis scope of services. 5F is our new 2018 state of the system scope of services. And then 5G is the Minton Road feasibility study scope of services.
All right, thank you, Georgiana. Any questions? All right, seeing none, I need a motion for the consent agenda, items A through G.
Motion to... Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Allender, second by Mayor Johnson. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those oppose, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item 6 are our action items, and that will be reported by Georgiana.
Actually, Stephen's going to do the
Okay.
tips.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Bostel. I'm the Transportation Program Manager. This is a Transportation Improvement Program amendment just to move some funding around to cover a couple of additions. The first one is the ITS project on US 192. They required a little bit more funding there to get the fiber optic cable underneath the railroad tracks. And then the second one is for the St. John's Heritage Parkway. It's a ACES study, which stands for Alternative Corridor Evaluation Study, which will come up with 2 to 4 proposed alignments for the final piece of the parkway going from Babcock Road all the way up to Malabar. And that study will be administered by Brevard County. And we are asking for approval via roll call vote.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Any questions for Stephen? All right. Seeing none, I'll need a motion and a second and then a roll call. All right. So I need a motion. So moved. All right.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Minus, second by Mr. Anderson, and for approval, and we'll go ahead with a roll call vote.
Thank you. Allender?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Forrester?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Lover?
Yes.
Meehan?
Yes.
Minus?
Yes.
Randall?
Yes, for the motion.
Santiago?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Glass?
Yes.
Did we got everybody? All right.
Thank you.
It got approved. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So item 6B is approval of the Resolution 19-21 Central Florida MPO Alliance 2020 Regional Project Priorities. Georgiana?
All right. We have not had any changes on this list. This is our annual adoption of the regional project priorities. So we are members of the Central Florida MPO Alliance, and so this is really a combined list of projects for the 6 MPOs of Central Florida. And so it's the River to Sea, the Lake Sumter TPO, Ocala Marion, Metroplan Orlando, and Polk County, and of course the Space Coast TPO. So it is interesting for everyone to get at the table, especially the directors, and in the very beginning when we first developed this list and try to fight out what the number 1 priority was going to be, and everyone got along just fine.
We sure did.
But the good news is that Ellis Road, the widening of Ellis, is the number 1 priority on the SIS list. The bad news is there's no additional money that goes with that list. So it's been sitting there for quite a while, and we are continuing to look for ways to try and move that project forward. There's right-of-way that's programmed over a 5-year period, but we have no construction money. and we would like to advance the right-of-way phase and then fund construction because we have a new interchange that will be opening within a year and a half or so. So that's going to make it very difficult to navigate Ellis Road. So on that list, we also have the beach line widening, which is kind of moving through the process until we determine what the direction of the beach line is going to be. And we also have our two critical bridges on the regional SIS list, and that is the NASA Causeway, Indian River Bridge replacement, and of course the 401 bridge replacement at Port. So this is critical infrastructure that as a region everyone recognizes is very important. We have our regional trails. We have a separate trails list, and of course the TPO has the coast to coast, the St. Johns River to Sea Loop, and parts of the East Coast Greenway on that list. That's moving through the process. And we also have a regional transit list, which is a list of projects that we discuss, and of course the Brightline Virgin Trains USA is all over that list because that is the intercity passenger rail that has kind of been on the list for quite a few years now. And we do have, for projects being studied or in development, the Brightline Brevard Station, the ridership study. So that is a project that we've had on this list for quite a while, and we would like to keep it on the list. And so that is our regional priorities. You can, there's lots of projects on here, and we hope that our funding situation will change to where we can get more projects funded in the future. But we are asking for approval of Resolution 19-21 and adopting the 2020 list. This list will then go to the Central Florida MPO Alliance at the end of the month for their adoption, and it will be combined as one regional list.
Thank you, Georgina.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah, yes.
I would like to move for approval if there's no discussion. I have the privilege of serving on that. And Georgia touched on a couple things. The 405 bridge replacement, that's a NASA Causeway. That's on here. And also the 401 bridge going over to the north side of the port is on here. And she spoke very favorably to the committee, and they were on there and they stayed on there. So a lot to say, and going to the next group, there's 7 counties over here that support this. So it's quite important. You were there, thank you.
I have one question on the Ellis Road widening. Are we still on track on the design? Because we need to get to 60% design.
I have a meeting with John tomorrow to kind of talk about Ellis. There is the 2019 build grant that has hit the streets, and we're going to discuss if this could potentially be a viable candidate for that, if we can come up with the match to the federal dollar. That's the key. But yes, it's my understanding they're moving towards 60% design plans. I see Karina actually in the audience. Is that correct? Excellent.
Thank you. All right, so if we're on track, then hopefully with this 5-year right-of-way funding coming off and then going to the construction, I think that would be a good work at it. All right.
Wow.
Any
And
other
that's
question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a question, if I
Yeah.
can, Georgiana. That was a $22 million project. How much is really short?
For Ellis? The estimate, the construction estimate, I think is around 26 million, but that is kind of an old estimate.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we need to look at that. The right-of-way is roughly around 40 million, but
I've never seen that figure.
the majority of it is programmed on the back end of the work program in the 5th year of the work program,
Oh,
which is
I'll be
too far
104
away.
We don't need that much right-of-way.
But
I mean, if the
Exactly.
design comes out at the 60%, we'll pretty much know what that construction cost will be.
That is the hope, is
Yeah.
that once they get to 60%, perhaps we won't need that much right away, and it could be converted to construction.
that's encouraging because that's a high priority in the south part of the county.
Absolutely.
That's right. All right. So if there's no other questions, I need a motion. All right.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval by Ms. Young, second by Commissioner Lober. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? And I vote aye, and the motion passes. All right, next is we will go into presentations and Virgin Trains USA Phase 2 status, and that will be Rusty Roberts. Welcome, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor, appreciate it very much. Glad to be here, members of the TPO Board. Rusty Roberts, Government Affairs for Virgin Trans USA, formerly Brightline. We actually formally put the paperwork in a few weeks ago, so I have to get used to saying Virgin as opposed to Brightline, but we're very excited to be here. I want to give you an update on where we are, what's been happening, what's to be expected in Brevard County in the coming months with regard to the project. 2018 was a pretty momentous year for us, a lot of movement. We reached a lot of milestones, and we're at that point now we can really expeditiously move forward on finishing the project to Orlando. And so before I'm going to give you a little kind of a background update of what's happened in the last year, and then kind of segue into what to expect in the coming months, and also talk about some issues with regard to operations that a lot of people are asking. But before I do that, I just have to do my little promotion. A couple of members here have seen this already. Apologize to those who have. But this is a little video we made earlier in the year about the project that is a sort of a promotional feel-good issue, but also to kind of demonstrate to people what we've created in South Florida and what you might expect here when the train comes through. And the pictures you see are actual pictures of the operation and the stations as they look today. So that's not too long, only about an hour long here. Hold on one second.
Oh, you're making sure we're awake.
Say hello to the open track,
Do you have sound?
to the freedom to move.
Yeah. Let's see here for that.
It was making sound earlier.
I think PowerPoint has its own sound in addition to the OS. So when you full screen that again, I think on the bottom right there may be another icon.
Yeah, we're looking for that. We're looking at that. It looks
Oh, I
like
got you.
And then
Oh, like down here?
oh, down there. That's up all the way. Get another shot. That's up all the way. No mute.
Trey. There we go.
Say hello to the open track, to the freedom to move, to high-speed intercity rail service, to the first privately funded rail system in the U.S. in more than 100 years. Say hello to the business professionals, to the nightlifers, the dreamers, the adventurers. Say hello to the day trippers, to the last-minute field trips, to meaningful connections, to America's solution to traffic. Downtown Miami to downtown Fort Lauderdale to downtown West Palm Beach in about 30 minutes each for less than the cost of driving. And soon, Orlando and Tampa. Say hello to all the luxuries and amenities of first-class travel. And the freedom to actually get where you need to go. To a dynamic energy. To people and places you care about. To transforming downtown real estate. Say hello to a formula that can be replicated across the country. Atlanta to Charlotte. Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio. Los Angeles to Vegas. Chicago to St. Louis. And say hello to the future of express intercity travel in America. Say hello to Brightline.
It wasn't that long. Sorry. There we go. So, yeah, that last part we put in there for for another audience as well, because some folks may have read. We are looking already to expand out of Florida, and we've actually already purchased the rights and to build the system between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. So, with our new partners that we have, we're looking to actually bring this model to other areas and corridors that we call too short to fly, too long to drive, where studies all over the world do say that that's where you can make something like this work. And so we're excited about what we're bringing to the U.S. And of course, I mentioned new partners. I'll switch right to him. we did form a partnership last fall with the Virgin Group, Richard Branson. Some folks may have heard of him. He used to sell records, and he is has a large, he's in about 67 countries right now with his company, Virgin Group, Virgin Hotels, Virgin Trains in the UK, Virgin Hospitality, Virgin Tours, probably a couple I forgot, and he's also starting Virgin Voyages, which is first cruise ship out of, not Canaveral, sorry, but out of Miami next year. And so we'll work to bring him, we'll bring him to Canaveral. We'll work to bring him here. He'll be sorry, yeah. First ship, but there's always, you got to start somewhere, Commissioner. So we're excited to have him as our partner. He's a minority partner in the company, so we, the management of Brightline of Virgin Trains, does still own, control the management, the operation, but we did sign a licensing and marketing agreement with him so that we could use his brand, which really takes us, years ahead of where we might be when we tried to build the Brightline brand, and we're part of the now Virgin ecosystem. So all his customers that move through all his product we can help them move through our product too. Virgin Atlantic, forget that one. He flies into Orlando, of course, and Miami. So it really is a great partnership. And as everybody I think understands that this market is probably, if you're going to be successful in doing something like this might be the place to do it between Central Florida and South Florida. This state being the third largest in the country right now, but really what makes this important is the fact that our tourist industry in Florida, with 126 million people visiting Florida already, 78 of them going to Central Florida and this coast here with the visitor center at the Space Center, and one of the three largest cruise ports in the world being right here. The synergies between Central Florida and South Florida can't be matched probably anywhere in the country, in my view. So we know that this is the place to start out this kind of product, and we're ready to get going. That's kind of what the new train might look like. I kind of like the old color, but this one works too, so we'll take that. So in South Florida, we've been running for about 14 months now. We started in January 2018. We didn't really start running our full complement of service, and that's hourly service, until August of 2018. We started slow with just 2 cities, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. In May last year, we opened Miami. In August, we got up to hourly service. And with that, by the end of the year, we carried just about 700,000 passengers, which is actually better than Acela, which is the Amtrak system between New York and Washington. Their first year of operation, they carried about 600. So in a ramp-up, we're right where we want to be. And so we have already a good start to 2019. We've carried just about 250,000, I think 244,000 just in the first quarter of 2019. So we think we're on track to make this system work. And mentioning our ridership growth, we compare that with other systems around the world too. And as you can see from this chart, this is the way our ridership grew just in 2018. And so as we get up to that ramp up of where we get to about 1.5 to 2.5 million passengers in South Florida, and by the time we get up here anywhere between 3 and 5 million, that's when we know we will have a really successful product. And when we compared our ramp up, and I talk about this because a lot of people, one of the major narratives in terms of people discussing our product is, well, are we going to make it, and are we making money, and when will we make money? And so we like to demonstrate that in any new business, you have a ramp up. I just was listening to the news this morning about Uber, how much money they're losing still, but they're gaining, they're losing less money every year, right? And now they're about to go for an IPO. And other businesses, Amazon was not profitable for years and years and years. But compared to other systems similar to ours around the world, the Acela in Washington, Eurostar, England, Paris, London, and the Italo, which is private train in Italy, we're about the same place that they were at this time. So we're real thrilled. And the other part that we think is very important to success of a system like this is have your stations in the middle of an urban area. Airports have to be by design, outside of an urban core, and naturally, but a train station survives inside the middle of an urban core, and that's in downtown Miami. Certainly is representative of that, where we have about 11 acres we're developing down there, and connected to all the other systems. different down there than here, of course, because they have Metro Rail and they have Tri-Rail and they have Metro Mover, and so all of that's coming into our station, and we connect all of those. And then the land development opportunities around there. And I tell people we're three companies. We're a hospitality company that runs the transportation service that is also a land development company. And all of those are linked in, very closely linked together in terms of our business model. And that's just a quick picture here of what we look like downtown Miami and what we're building down there with 800 apartment units, office buildings, more to come later. That's a street view of our Miami Central Station, and you can see the train there is about 50 feet in the air. We're elevated. That's the only place we're elevated, and Miami being in a grid pattern, as we're approaching, we didn't want to really block off the street, so we elevated it. That sign at our station in Miami just been changed 2 weeks ago. Now it says Virgin on it, so I have to get a new photo there. And that column also now is red. It says Virgin. That's the interior of our station downtown Miami. And our station waiting lounges. This is similar to what you'll see when we build stations in Orlando and in this area. We have a look, we have a feel, we have a brand, and it's all going to be very similar. Very luxurious. We are not your average Amtrak station. We're probably, we think, the most innovative and modern train station in America today. This is a picture of our Fort Lauderdale station. So when you look at a station, we're going to do inline stations, and I talk about that, especially here in the Space Coast and Treasure Coast. There'll be a much smaller scale than we do in Miami, but look maybe something like that. We'll see what the architects come up with. And so this is a picture of our train, what you'll see coming through here. This is a picture of the first-class car. We call it Select. It's two in one row, one in the other row with wider seats. And just like first class on the airplane, we have a cart that goes down the aisle with free drinks and snacks and things like that. So, and our coach cars are very luxurious too, and room for your bicycle. We have bike racks, luggage racks, and we have a lot of people bringing their bikes on our train and use the trails and use it to get to work. And it's really working out very well down there. So where are we now? We're ready to start building to Orlando, and so that's phase 2. We have our financing package complete. About 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago now, we sold our major tranche of bonds, $1.75 billion in bonds we sold. We actually had orders to sell $4 billion worth of bonds. If we were able to have to sell that many, we would have sold $4 billion. But we're allocated 1.75. And these are bonds that are allocated by U.S. DOT under a 2005 law and passed in Congress to make tax-exempt bonds available for projects such as this that bring a public benefit. And that's for transportation projects, docks and wharves, and things like that, not sports stadiums. And so, we took advantage of that program and got those bonds. And we're actually going to market with another $900 million probably this month, if not next. And that completes the financing for this project to Orlando. All our construction contracts have been let, all awarded. Our materials are being brought in now. Staging will start to happen. You're going to see some of that in this county. We have some property near what I call the Cocoa Curve, which is behind the Walmart, Clear Lake, around there. And we'll probably be using that as some staging areas of some of our equipment, and all up and down the corridor, and certainly around Orlando. The Orlando Intermodal Terminal is ready and waiting for us to bring the train in there. We haven't built out the station space, but certainly the building is there, and if you've been into the airport, you've seen that new building and all the new construction for the new terminal that's going on right now. I counted 14 cranes there the other day when I was driving up, so we're excited about that. Our office is in that building now. And then we're also still in the middle of a site selection and finally just making decisions on what we're going to do about our stations, inline stations north of West Palm, between Orlando and West Palm. And that includes the Treasure Coast now, whereas originally we really didn't envision a station on the Treasure Coast, but we're going to put one there, possibly two, and certainly the Space Coast. We started this process with the TPO a long time ago to identify several locations, and we're still looking at the two that have been favored, and they're all in the Cocoa Rock Ledge area, and that's over by the 528 and US 1 by the Walmart, and further south at Rosa Jones Boulevard, which is the old FEC station where it sits right now. And then we're in the middle of determining where we might want to station or stations in the Treasure Coast in Martin County, St. Lucie County, or Indian River. Mostly looking at Martin and St. Lucie County. So the process in terms of those inline stations and in terms of a ridership study, which Georgiana mentioned earlier this morning, will all happen simultaneously. When we do a ridership study, we're going to do a ridership study for the region, so for the Space Coast as well as Treasure Coast stations. And we expect to start that ridership study process very, very soon, certainly this year, probably this summer. This is a picture of the Cocoa Curve that just to give you a reference of how this works. So the orange line is the FEC railway tracks that we will be double tracking. Areas where you see a single track, that will be double. The new track will be on the west side of the existing track. Where there are instances where that track that there now is in the middle of our corridor, we might move it over a little bit, but generally we have room to add that second track on the west side. We call it the West Main, two mains, West Main, East Main. And just to remind folks, this railroad used to be double tracked originally when it was first built, so it's wide enough for two tracks. It's wide enough for more. But when Flagler's company finished it, it was double tracked. One track was pulled up in the early 70s when passenger rail went out of business in '68. We're putting it back down. As we go north, as you know, the tracks go under the beach line, under 528, and we will do that as well. But then we curve around to the left. That's what I call the Cocoa Curve. And that land, there's a cement plant there, as folks know, and but we own some of that land. And then we kind of move into the 528 corridor. We already have our lease agreements with Florida DOT in place to use that right away. And just before we get to the the I-95 interchange there, you see, and this is not exact, this is just a representation, so don't hold me to this exactly, but we will actually go to the other side, to the south side of 528. And so, and we're going to go under 528 at that point, not over. So we will not be building a bridge over, but we will be building a bridge over the cloverleaf, I guess we call it, over that interchange. The track will actually sort of bend down a little bit. Instead of going straight across, hugging the main highway, it'll sort of bend down a little bit to the south and back up, going over those ramps on the south side. And then we stay on the south side of 528 all the way into the airport, where we head into the train station, the intermodal terminal at the new south terminal that they're building. As you can see, when we turn left off the 528 and head toward the airport, that gold line, a little blurry on that screen, but that's a transportation corridor that the airport designers designed when they built this airport in 1970s. When they built this airport, they planned for a transportation corridor there. And so we were able to utilize that. The folks who designed this thing had a lot of foresight, utilized that to get to the south terminal. And the south terminal, just to remind folks, that airport that they're building now was designed in the 1990s. And when they designed it, they planned for an intermodal terminal facility to be the centerpiece of that new terminal. So what we're going into is nothing new on paper. It's been there since the 90s. They planned it originally for the former iterations of high-speed rail that were being discussed in Governor Graham's administration, Governor Childs' administration, Governor Bush's administration. We've had 2 or 3 attempts to build some sort of high-speed rail, more like the California style, but they never came to be. But the airport decided that they're going to keep that design in place. When we came along, we knew that they were about to pull the trigger to build that new terminal because their trigger was reaching 40 million passengers a year. They're at 48 right now for an airport designed for 25. And so we knew that they were about to build it. So we said, hey, could we be the tenant? And so that's what we're doing. We're the paying tenant in that building. And as you know, it's designed to also accommodate Sunrail. The People Mover that's running now, if you park in C parking, I recommend that. It's the easiest garage in the whole complex, and it's $2 cheaper. What's a light rail that they may build to the convention center, which is on paper, but we'll see if that ever gets built. And so, and then from there, we go south. We have our maintenance facility to the south. It's hard to see on this map, but we have 80 acres releasing from the airport for our maintenance. All the maintenance will happen there and storage overnight and that kind of thing. And that's what this terminal looks like now. If you've seen it, you're driven by, that's what it looks like. With the tracks coming in from the north there, the people mover tracks, and that grassy area would be the alignment that the Virgin trains will use. We come out the south side to the maintenance facility, but also then to the, that's our route to Tampa, which we're also talking about. This picture needs to be replaced because this is a representation of what the station entrance will look like in that terminal, and now instead of yellow, it's going to be red, I think. But we'll get new pictures eventually. You've seen that already. And this is a quick look at our Tampa expansion. I just wanted the folks to see it because as we leave, not a very good picture here on the screen, but as we leave the airport to the south, we're in discussions with the Orlando Utilities Commission, with the Sunrail Authority, and with Central Florida Expressway Authority to use access to their corridors to get to I-4 and then all the way to Tampa. The interesting part of this route is on our way to I-4, we're stopping, we go right by the Meadowood Sunrail station. So instead of the Sunrail folks trying to figure out a way to pay to bring that train into Orlando Airport, which has always been in the plan, but it's not even authorized by Congress or by FTA, and it is not funded, we are able to go that way and build a platform right next to the current platform in Sunrail so people can transfer from Sunrail to the Virgin or vice versa, and then on their way to Tampa. And that really solves the Sunrail problem in terms of getting to Orlando Airport at no taxpayer expense. And so that's in the plan right now, and those discussions are underway. And then quickly, we've already had, I think, a major economic impact downtowns in the 3 downtowns in South Florida, where development around our stations is booming in all 3 cities. In Miami, it's amazing. Marriott's going to build an 1,600-room hotel right next to, if you've ever seen a hotel that big in Florida, I don't think so, right next to our station with a 500,000-foot convention center. And similar activities going on in the other cities. Obviously, we don't have development opportunities in the Orlando stop because we're at the airport, but we would at some of the inline stations and, of course, in Tampa. And we are creating jobs, and we expect to create jobs. Our economic report that we did early on in this project estimated about 1,400 jobs just in Brevard County. That includes temporary construction, but also permanent jobs that will come later on, direct, indirect, and induced. And so we think we're having a major economic impact on the state. So what are we doing as we prepare to construct to Orlando? First of all, we're doing a lot of active public engagement. This requires a lot of outreach to all the cities and counties along the corridor. So we've begun this process already. Some in this room, we've been to your city. Some we're about to go to, Melbourne, Cocoa, Rockledge. But we're doing construction management meetings with every city and county. That would be with the city managers, with public works directors, with fire departments, with police departments, with our construction management team, by the way, which is based in Melbourne. We have an office in Melbourne. Mayor, I don't know if you knew that.
No, sir, I didn't.
And we have a lot of people working out of there.
Where's your office?
I've not been there yet.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, is the lease signed? Because that counts.
They're there. In fact, I was supposed to be at a meeting there yesterday, 8 o'clock, and I said, I'm not getting up that early. But anyway.
But I'm glad you woke up early for today's meeting.
This is the important meeting. This is the important meeting. They didn't need me at that meeting. So, our construction management team is based there, and we are basically, these are people who are going to be on the ground. It's like a very well orchestrated dance, the way we're going to be doing this. So we have to be able to have with our public information officer, be well connected with your public information officer for public notification of closures, because when we close a crossing to rebuild it, and they'll be totally revamped as we lay new track, new gates, moving gates, some crossings will be closed for days. Not more than a week. There is a few instances we've had to close a crossing for a week, but usually it's 3 days, 2-3 days. And so maintenance of traffic detours, very, very important to notify people. Very important that we coordinate so we're not doing, 2nd Street and 3rd Street at the same time, we're doing 2nd Street and 6th Street, right? So we have detour opportunities. And so those types of activities are going on. We need to work closely with every municipality along the corridor to do that. And of course, that's going along in concert with the other discussions about future plans like the inline stations that we hope to do. Additionally, we're doing an active, aggressive safety campaign, safety and outreach campaign, and this is not only to do with our construction activities, because with freight trains will be moving during this construction, and we'll have to have safety personnel out there, especially if gates are temporarily not operating and things like that, flagmen, but also where we're operating trains. And so we have a broad-based community outreach program down in South Florida, ongoing all the time. When we started this project, we rented about 20 or 30 of these variable message signs, the ones that you see on the side of the road saying we're going to be closed from midnight to 5 a.m., those kinds of signs in various crossings to warn people, hey, new train service is operating, and pay attention. Public service announcements. We did over 2,000 PSAs on radio and TV in South Florida when we started up. We have sent out our employees as safety ambassadors to businesses along the corridor in towns like Melbourne and in Cocoa, where we're going through the middle of an urbanized section. We will pass flyers out at every business along that road, and that they can give the customers. Yes, sir,
Rusty,
Mr.
do you want us to hold questions till the end, or should we ask as it comes up?
I'm about 2 minutes into the end, and then you can go questions.
Thanks.
Programs in schools. We have safety cards. We give kids, and we make them sign a pledge card saying, I will not walk on tracks, and I will, won't ride my bike along the tracks and things like that. Bus driver training. We've trained over 500 bus drivers down in South Florida about how to make sure that you follow the rules when you're getting near the tracks, and also first responder training. We do training systems for all the fire and police agencies with our safety security team, and our safety and security team are very professional people, been in the industry for decades. We've hired a bunch of them from the Northeast, from railroads up there, who happy to be living in Florida and working for us, and so it's working out very, very well. When we design the crossings, we're designing them to sealed corridor treatments, which is an FRA, FDOT mandate, Florida DOT and FRA coordinated to set a standards by which we will do the crossings, and that is mostly where today you see 2 gates, you might see 4. And you might see a median going down the center yellow line. Vehicle presence detection in parts of the corridor where we're going higher speeds, VPD. That is a system that notifies the oncoming train that somebody's stuck in the crossing and you need to stop the train or slow the train down. Traffic signal preemption. If you have a street and where the cars are sort of stacked up because of a red light on the other side of the track, and suddenly I find myself, because I'm not paying attention, I didn't stop over here, but I stopped on the track. If that train starts coming, that traffic light ahead is automatically turned green. It goes out of cycle, but back in cycle after everything gets back. And that's where we have to coordinate with actually the traffic department in each city and county that we're in, whoever has traffic control. And all our crossings will have diagnostic health monitoring, where an automatic system, if there's a failure, a signal failure, and the gates aren't operating properly, and we've all seen that from time to time, it notifies the oncoming train ahead of time, so that train can slow down, and that engineer in that train can notify dispatch that there's a problem at the New Haven crossing or something, and that's how we're doing that. And we're installing PTC, Positive Train Control, mandated by Congress, will be installed before we start operating in this area. The good news is Florida East Coast Railway is one of the most modern trains in the country in terms of that kind of equipment. They installed a precursor to PTC in the 90s called ATC, Automatic Train Control, which already does 4 of the major components, 4 of the 6 components that PTC has. ATC, the most important one, is prevents train-to-train collisions. We have that today. Have had it for decades. But all that will be installed as we go along. Speed enforcement, don't go around a curve too fast, those kinds of things. And so that is underway. And now, Commissioner, I am finished, Madam Chairman, and I am ready to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Commissioner Lober.
Okay, a couple of questions for you, if I may. So you touched at least in part on one of the items I was going to ask about sealed corridors.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask a further question about that and then also get into quiet zones if I could, real briefly. So what are the plans with respect to sealed corridors? Are essentially all of the crossings going to be sealed corridors, or half of them going to be sealed corridors? What's the current plan with that?
Happen to have a picture.
All right.
So this is an example of one sealed corridor, and I'll answer your question, but this is an example of one way to do a sealed corridor. You see the yellow line up and down the center of the Midway Road there. I think this is in St. Lucie County. That would be a center median. That's basically a Jersey barrier type cement median in the middle of the road to keep you from trying to go around the gates to beat the train. So in this instance, you can have two gates, one gate for each lane on either side, but still there's no way for somebody who thinks he's going to beat the train by going around it because of that median. In this particular picture, you can see where we've moved the gates because we've added that double track. And so there's used to be a gate sort of in the center where that red one is, and they're moved out. The other sealed corridor is this kind. This is the four gates. In this particular picture, the red gates are where they exist today. The yellow gates are where they'll be moved to. And then double tracked here. And obviously you won't be able to get around those gates either. So the FDOT and FRA requirements in this regard are basically based on speed. But it's not, we break the rule a little bit. And what I mean by that is we're certainly have been flexible and continue to be flexible with cities and communities who want to do this. Where we are going less than 79 miles per hour, we are only required to do two gates. Where we are going more than 79 miles per hour, we are required to put in the four gates. That's the sealed corridor. There are areas where we've, in working with local communities, we've made arrangements to go ahead and maybe put in four gates anyway, or the median, or sometimes when you don't do a cement median, you put in maybe those yellow plastic poles down the middle that delineators that you could drive over, but generally they do a good job of telling people now. So an example, I'm not sure what we're doing in downtown Melbourne with that street there, but I think that's planned for four gates, even though we're not
We
going.
need to, yes.
Not going for 70. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that one.
I know, but
I've forgotten over the months on this, years on this.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
It's very challenging in downtown Melbourne. Ms. Young?
I have several, but I promise I'll hold it down. That's okay. I'll just have one here.
Fine.
Since I've been, I'm sure we all have been hearing about this for years and years, and I've heard the speed that you'll be going anywhere from 100 miles an hour to 70 miles an hour. I just heard you say less than 79. As you come up north and then you make the Cocoa Curve, you're obviously going to have to slow down. I heard you say that.
Absolutely.
Then do you regain again to go back to your top speed, and what will that top speed
Sure. So
be?
if you picture that Cocoa Curve map, if you're heading north, obviously as we approach the curve, we'll be slowing down. I don't know what the speed rating of that curve is. It's probably less than 60. But then when we straighten out basically and head toward Orlando Airport, we'll be going 125.
125. Now, is this
That's the only place we're
It's
going
the only
that fast.
place, okay. Is this a traditional diesel train that can take a mile or more to stop, or is this the kind that stops as soon as the power is cut?
Cut that in half. No, I mean, it still takes a while to stop because it is a large, heavy piece of equipment with very powerful. Let me back up just a little bit and answer that question. So our top speed that we're allowed to go along the north-south corridor is 110. There are certain areas where we'll be going less than, in the 70s. There are certain areas we're going in the 30s. There are certain areas where we can go 110. And then that 79 to 110 is sort of that window where we have to do the sealed corridor areas. On the braking, it's a short train. Right now it's 6 cars. When we start operating up here, maybe not right away, it'll still be shorter, but it'll end up being 9 cars maximum. That's 2 locomotives, or one in each end, and then the passenger cars in between, hopefully a cafe car. A freight train, which can be a mile long or more, is going to take several miles to stop. I can't tell you, and I'm sure there's an answer to the question, I just don't know it. I can't tell you how long it takes to stop. Say we're going 60 miles an hour. I do not know how long it takes to stop our train, but it does take some time. It's certainly not stopping on a dime. There's definitely a distance. I would guess probably at least half a mile. on that. But it's, again, depending on speed.
And what are you doing for noise abatement?
Well, so our trains are very, very quiet already. So when you see a freight train going by, or you can hear the freight train going by and feel the freight train going by, it's totally different with us because it's a much lighter train and much smaller. We actually have suspension systems where freight doesn't need a suspension system, and baffles. It's designed for comfort ride for the customer, but it's also brings us quiet. The engines are much quieter than a locomotive and a freight. They're most modern engines today. They're actually most cleanest burning engines today. EPA Tier 4 is what they're called in terms of their carbon footprint. And so we are like, it's like compared to a Toyota versus an 18-wheeler. I mean, we have very low noise, very low vibration. You hardly feel the vibration at all. And it's much quieter. And when it goes by in 45 seconds or less. Well, if we're at a crossing, it's 45 seconds. But when we're just, if you're somewhere in between, it's just going to go by in a few seconds. So that it's more of a whoosh than a steel. And also a freight train, you hear a lot of steel on steel squealing and things like that, right? Especially it's going around a curve. We're tightening up the attenuation on the track. So when you see a freight train going by, you're going to see that if you stood behind it, it's kind of go like that, With us, it'll be just going straight like that. So that cuts down on the noise too, because we tighten up those tracks a little bit. They run much smoother, and you can run faster speeds. The noise is not a major factor with the trains.
I'm glad to hear
That was a long answer to that short last sentence.
And then for public outreach, would I go through Georgiana to reach you to ask you to please speak elsewhere?
Yes, that would be fine.
Just go through Georgiana.
But I'll give you my card before I leave.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Johnson, next by Mr. Forrester and Commissioner Lober.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you give me an approximate cost of a ticket from Miami to Orlando?
So we haven't set costs yet for that route. We probably won't even announce ticket cost till maybe a month or two before we start operations. So I'll answer it this way. We have to compete with the cost of driving and the cost of flying. So if it's to entice you to get out of your car. So I think the IRS rate right now, reimbursement rate's like 55 cents a mile, so times 235, someone's got a calculator, they can tell me what that is. But we certainly have to compete with that, but also with what American Airlines is going to charge you flying from Orlando to Miami. So, and in the beginning, I can assure you, you're going to find some pretty low prices because we're going to have introductory prices. In South Florida, 65 miles. When we started running, we charged $15 a person, regular coach. Now I think it's about $22 one way, where first class, which we call select, can get up to about $44 one way. That's for a 65-mile run right there. So, it's not going to be like on a Sunrail price or Tri-Rail. That's not what we are. We're a much different train.
You told me everything about it except an approximate price. Has anyone come up with an approximate price? A number that's public?
Somebody do the math on the 235, and that's going to be an approximate price.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Forrester.
One of my pet peeves with Florida East Coast is that when they decide they want to improve a crossing, the city gets a bill for a six-figure number. How is your program, if you're going to double track these lines for those of us whose cities have a lot of crossings in them, and Rockledge doesn't have a lot, but it's enough that I don't like getting a bill for $150,000 every time Florida East Coast wants to go in and change a couple of rails or something. So how is Virgin going to work with that?
It's a great question. I will, preface my answer by just saying that the reason why the city is paying, and everybody in this room, if they represent a municipality, has the same type of agreement. Everybody has crossing license agreements with the railroad. In almost every case, the railroad was there first before the road. Railroad's private property. The city or county wanted to cross the road, and they have to ask permission. They just can't take it by eminent domain. So they enter an agreement with the railroad, and now Now that that road is there, suddenly we require safety equipment, and that's not there for the benefit of the railroad, it's for the benefit of the citizens of that particular community. That's why the communities pay for the maintenance of the crossing, because you're putting a public road across private land. You have to continue to maintain that road, it's your road, and you maintain the safety equipment that is now required. So that's how that works, and that's every railroad, CSX, everybody has the same thing. With that said, when we come along, the extra track does increase the annual inspection fees, because the inspection fees, which we don't set, the railroads don't set, the state of Florida does, and I have a schedule maybe in my file. It's about as low as $2,000, as high as $8,000. And so when you add another track, it adds a couple of more $1,000 to the inspection fee. So you might see an additional annual inspection fee that the cities are required. And then the maintenance comes around every so many years, usually 5 to 10 years, depending on the amount of traffic that goes across the rails. And so the cost of the maintenance is split by the railroad and the municipality. The railroad takes care of maintaining, the rail alignment and everything regarding operations, and then asphalt and other things are done under contract with the cities. We agreed in, what year is this, 2019? I think it was in 2015 or 16. 14? 14. We had the same discussion with the county. And so we actually agreed to, put in abeyance those maintenance costs for 8 years. So when we go through and rebuild the crossing, two things are going to happen. One is you're going to get a brand new crossing that won't need maintaining for a while. And two, pretty much the first round of maintenance comes through, we're going to pay for 100%. So we agreed a long time ago with the county, and we extended that agreement to every city along our corridor, that we will be paying for 100% of crossing maintenance for the first 8 years. If a crossing is required to be maintained in that 8 years, we rebuild it, you're probably going to get another 8 years without a cost, or at least 5 years without a cost. So there will be a number of years where there will be no bills due. FEC Railway will continue to do the maintenance. We will not. The FEC Railway is the underlying owner of the railroad, so they will continue to handle the maintenance issues.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Lober, followed by Ms. Maynes.
Rusty, a couple of questions. Just to get back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier with the quiet zones.
Yes.
I guess I'll kind of start backwards here. So I've spoken with Frank Abate, our county manager, and I've asked him, this was probably a month or so ago, to reach out to the different city managers, if he's amenable to doing that, to see if they would like the county, when we apply for quiet zones for the county, to ease the burden on the individual municipalities by essentially offering to do the work for them as well, to apply for quiet zones. Now, if anyone hasn't heard from Mr. Abate that's associated with the municipality, please have your city manager reach out to him. But for everyone's benefit sitting here, would you please let folks know just generally about quiet zones? I understand that it's not the private entity that grants them, but all the same, I think you have more expertise than anyone else in this room about quiet zones.
Happy to answer that. Thank you, Commissioner. The quiet zone basically means you're not going to have to hear train horns anymore. And so in order to take away the safety factor of a train horn, you had to replace that safety factor with new safety factors. And that would be things like quad gates, center medians are the two most common things to do. So when a city or county wants a quiet zone, generally under the rules, federal regulations, city or county wants quiet zones, and this happened, by the way, in Winter Park with Sunrail, they would have to pay for the extra safety equipment, not the railroad, and then they would apply. What we have said was, look, we're pretty sure that the work we're going to be doing along here is going to automatically qualify everybody for quiet zones anyway. And we would certify that, of course. And we also agreed, by the way, talking about agreements with the county, is we agreed that if the work we are doing, the design work we are doing on the crossings, does not get everybody to a quiet zone status, we will spend an extra $500,000 to get there if we need to for quiet zone status. So if there's any deficiency somewhere, we will budget it to $500,000 more to get us to where we go. With that, we expect that the entire county, at least up to Titusville, because we're not going into Titusville yet, will be eligible for quiet zones without anybody having to pay for anything. The application process is a municipal responsibility. Railroads are not allowed to apply for the quiet zone. The locals have to do it. You can do it by municipality, or you can have somebody like the county do a blanket application for everybody. And in South Florida, I think the MPO is actually doing the application for Palm Beach County to get everybody at the same time. I think that's working. So, and we would supply you with all the data you needed, and you just file the paperwork. And what happens is, you file the paperwork, you tell the FRA, we qualify for quiet zone, and then there's an automatic 21-day period, I don't know why, 21-day period before you can silence the horns. And during that time, you have to put up signs. Every crossing has to have signs that says no train horns, to warn people, things like that. Midnight, trains are silenced, horns are silenced. They're allowed to blow the horn anytime they want if they see a danger, of course, but generally, you should be no problem.
I was just going to mention, back in 2014, the TPO coordinated the quiet zone analysis, and we actually have a rail initiatives page on our website, and it has the resolution from 2014, and that resolution basically says that the TPO would coordinate the application.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, we were looking through that information. Bob Com had a big part in handling that, and Lamy. So, I think it definitely would be appropriate for one agency to kind of coordinate that. So
Yes, if you all are amenable, I'd rather take the burden off Frank and kind of shift it in this direction, so that's perfect.
So, the application part of it, and it would need to be an effort with all the municipalities, together, a team effort, but yeah, that's...
Yeah, my thought is if it's something where essentially most of the work is being done anyway to get one in, if it's a minimal additional burden to add in the municipalities that want to participate, it's just a win-win.
And the Broward NPO and all that coordination.
Thank you.
Well, that would be good. Ms. Minus.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Lober, for bringing that up. That was
Yes, ma'am.
part two of my questions I asked. Because I live less than a block away from the tracks, and to hear another train, that would be, I would never get any sleep. But thank you for that quiet zone. Thank you. My other question is, you notice we've had several or many accidents on the railroad tracks where someone slept, someone got caught on the tracks or whatever, and I think that's a great feature that you're going to have, where you can, you'll be able to monitor way ahead of time, that a train is coming. How far in advance will that conductor know that there's an obstruction on the tracks? Because they have to have an adequate amount of time to stop,
Slow down
right?
and stop. I'm not sure. I think it's a little more than a mile, but I'm not real sure. I can need to ask that, and I can get back to you on that one. Not sure.
Okay, so they'll have time to stop, and then if they need to call the police, or if they, or
Well,
to address that issue.
Yeah,
That obstruction.
exactly. The engineer would automatically notify dispatch, which notifies maintenance, which sends somebody out to fix it, for one thing, if there's a broken signal. If there's a car in the tracks, basically, it's usually because he's waiting for a red light, and it'll clear. Once in a while, this is a great example. If I'm heading from the bottom of that screen and I want to turn left on Old Dixie Highway, sometimes people get confused, and they turn left right onto the tracks. And then when your car gets on the track that is no longer flush with the pavement, you're stuck because the tracks are elevated, a little bit raised up. And so that's an issue. And that's one of the things that obviously we stop the train and certainly want to get it stopped before it collides with the car. We still advise anyone to get out of the car and get away. But then you call the authorities and remove the vehicle, tow it away. We've had that happen a few times. We're looking at some new safety equipment that we can install. We just talked to FDOT about this a few weeks ago, where we installed it to, like these little delineators, plastic poles, to discourage people from accidentally doing that. We're looking at new ways and new innovative ways to kind of mitigate some of these safety issues that we have.
If there's, I understand if there's a vehicle on the tracks, but if there's an individual, someone
I don't think that
something on
vehicle present ejection will note an individual on the tracks. That is a problem. All railroads have, where people like to use the railroad track as their sidewalk. People like to beat a train, whether they're a pedestrian or a car. But the biggest problem, Commissioner, is suicide.
Yeah.
Probably 70 to 80% of the fatalities on our railroad and any railroad are suicide. Somebody gets on the track and just stands there, and we've had all kinds of ways. Laying on the tracks, it's very sad, and we're trying to deal with that. We've actually, with Tri-Rail in South Florida, railroads are starting to get into the business of coordinating with suicide prevention organizations. Like Tri-Rail is putting up signs to crossings, if you need help, feeling sad, call this number, those kinds of things. Most of those are out of the railroad's control. People, if they want to get onto the corridor, they're going to do it. And so we have to, figure out ways to discourage it, make it difficult, pardon me, and education is a big factor as well.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Allender? and then-
Rusty, when can it be anticipated that a decision might be made about a station in Brevard County?
That's a good question, and I don't think I have an answer. We are laser focused on getting this thing connected to Orlando. We've been saying that for years. We've had some delays. A lot of people know why. We've had some issues with some folks to our north. We've had we should slow down the funding packages and everything. But we're here, and we're ready to go. But like I said, we've already ramped up the discussions and the consideration of those inlet stations. About a month ago, actually no, it's been more than 2 months now. We came up here, our chief development officer, we have a chief development guy for development, and I came up here secretly and drove around and looked at all the sites, although we did meet with Georgiana, and looked at because our chief development officer is relatively new and he hadn't seen it, so I said, you got to come look at these options. So we've surveyed all the station sites. We're in the middle of sort of trying to consider where do we want to go, but we have to do that ridership study. And what slowed down the ridership study is now the Treasure Coast stations being in the mix. We don't want to have to pay for 2 ridership studies. So we want to figure out where we're going to be there, what county. That really has to happen before we do the ridership study. All that will happen at the same time. We're hoping to have all that completed before this year is over. Because we would like to be able to get ahead of the curve in planning and construction, even though we're starting service in Orlando, which is not expected for 2022. We think we could be in the early planning environmental process before that, with these stations in line. So that's the idea.
All right, Commissioner Lober again.
Thank you. So just a question to touch base on the item about having someone on the tracks. Is the vehicle presence detection, is that based on a change in magnetic field? Or is that something that requires, I don't want to get into the scientific minutia, I'm curious if that's something that's...
I have no idea, Commissioner, how that technology works.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Appreciate it.
You gave me something to ask my engineers.
Thanks.
Mr. Randalls.
Thank you. Rusty, it's been a long time since your first presentation of 2014 that I had the privilege of sitting in. This is very informative, and you've answered most questions. My one question is, currently the one set of tracks that we have going south is used by freight lines, a slow-moving freight line. Do you anticipate using that as one of your 2 tracks?
Yes, sir. Yes, we will be using both tracks. So when we lay the new track, we'll actually be rebuilding the existing track, upgrading it to what we call Class 6, which is a better grade track. It's what I showed you about that attenuation. For a smoother operation, and we'll be installing a lot of interlockings, crossovers, where base switches, where you can switch tracks left or right. And
okay. Well, that answers my next question, because the freight trains is usually 100 cars, and they're long and slow. And if you're running every half hour, you're going to meet one someplace.
we got to pass them. We have to pass them. So we go around. That's what that's for. Also, the other reason is the freight company has customers all along the corridor, right, in every county, and that freight train his customer might be in the west side or the east side of the track, so he's got to be able to get over to the siding, so that it works there as well.
Wow, thank you.
All right.
And so we'll all use them.
All right, Mr. Gugelman.
Yeah, back to the safety issues. You have you're basically going to have two operators on these tracks, the FEC and Virgin Trains, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What steps are Virgin and FEC going to jointly take as far as coordinating with the local governments for anything operational? And let me give you an example of why I asked this question. I think everybody here remembers some years ago, there were some kids that went out on the railroad trestle that goes over Crane Creek, and they were hit by a train, FEC, not Virgin. And FEC decided they were concerned about getting a better understanding of exactly how this happened, and I think there were also probably some concerns about, potential liability and things like that. So they decided to do a study to reenact what happened. There was no notice that was given to the city of Melbourne, and they decided to run a train at a relatively high speed through downtown Melbourne at around 5:30 in the afternoon on St. Patrick's Day. And no notice to the city at all. The city found out about it surely by accident, and had incredible problems getting a hold of FEC.
And you have a parade, don't you?
Pardon me?
You have a parade
Yes,
on
sir.
St. Patrick's Day.
Oh,
It's
yeah, well,
huge.
it's not just that. There are a lot of bars in downtown Melbourne, and right by the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And so the concern was, you're going to have drunks out there, and who knows what else, and it's not the best time to, run that kind of a test. If you're going to do it, give notice and do it on March 18th or something like that. So the question that I have is now rather than one operator, we're going to have two operators, which I think increases the potential of a lack of coordination. And then you've got, coordinating with the various local governments. So I'm just curious to know if anybody's looking ahead to that, or if they're just going to, have it all done by some computer, or...
But I would say that we've already solved for that, and it's a great question. And we're operating jointly down in South Florida, so these issues, this is not something that you might anticipate might happen here, but we're already have to deal with that. So I'll answer it in this way: the public outreach and community involvement activities that you discuss are something that we feel very strongly about, and I think where we have been and will be operating very differently than your average freight railroad company. And when I talked about earlier about us doing our construction management meetings and our coordination meetings we're going to do with everybody, that is just not going to be ongoing because we're doing construction, but it's going to be ongoing because we're operating trains. And for instance, in these construction management meetings, we ask them, we tell them, we expect to be constructing in your town these months. Are there any special events going on, that we need to know about, we need to change our schedule? And we'll be doing that for operations too. We're doing that in South Florida already. When the Fort Lauderdale boat show is happening, we change our schedule. And so those kinds of instances, we're working with the community. So I think you're going to find that we operate very differently than our freight cousin, because we're a customer service company. We're just not hauling stuff. And so that part of that is dealing with the communities. And wait a minute. Dispatch, you said, some computer. We're not having two operations. We're having one operation with two different trains. There's one traffic control, let me say that. So what we did was, Florida East Coast Railway dispatches their trains. Instead of having Florida East Coast Railway dispatch our trains too, the two companies got together and decided to create a separate company, a dispatch company, that would be objective and non-biased and dispatch both trains. And so we created a company based in Jacksonville, because that's where dispatch is anyway, called Florida Dispatch Company. And Florida East Coast Railway and Virgin contract with those guys to dispatch our trains. So there's no independent operation of one or the other. one organization knows where every train is relative to the other. And so I don't think we're going to have those kinds of issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Looking forward to our meeting in Melbourne.
Thank you.
Item 7B is the FDOT MPO joint certification. Georgiana? And, all right, Ms. Smith, welcome.
Good morning. This is going to be a quick presentation to go over the certification. This is an annual product that the MPO and the DOT work together on, and we want to be able to present to you guys. Normally we put the information in your packet, but we just kind of want to go over because it is an important part of our processes. Federal law requires the DOT and the TPO to jointly certify the transportation planning process. It's concurrent with the submittal of the TIP. The proposed, or the purpose of the certification review is to ensure that the planning requirements are being satisfactorily implemented. The TPO and the district work together to answer questions that are given to us by central office. The district and the TPO meet to discuss the findings, and we submit the final package and present to the board. If there are any issues, we go through central office and FHWA to get a resolution. However, there are no issues in Space Coast. Part of the certification that's new is the risk assessment. It's to satisfy the federal requirements. DOT worked with the MPOAC to come up with a risk assessment that all of the MPOs were satisfied with, and this is the first year that we've assigned risk. The questions are quantified using a point scale to assign the level of risk annually. And the result of these risk assessment determines the level of monitoring that the liaison will do during the fiscal year. For Space Coast, the risk assessment is low, so we will just be monitoring one invoice per fiscal year. And for the recommendations and corrective actions, this is part of the certification as well. We just recommend that the TPO utilize as much of their allocated PL funds before they use their SU funds. It's just part of the management of the funding through the TPO. The TPO does a very good job of doing this already, so we just would like them to continue to do so. For noteworthy practices and achievements, there's a lot in Space Coast. You guys are a strong TPO, strong board, strong TPO staff, and we just want to commend the TPO and the TPO staff for the smooth transition for the executive director. In our district, we've had 4 new executive directors in the past year, which is unheard of because we've had such a senior leadership throughout many years. So the smooth transition has been helpful to both the TPO and the department. We also want to recognize the strong public outreach that you guys have for involvement and engagement. You work to educate the public on the TPO's responsibilities and the projects. There's a lot of effort that is going on here, and it's a noteworthy practice within our district. There's a strong social media presence, although the department doesn't really have a strong social media presence. We look out there and see all of the involvement that is going on. Also, the up-to-date reports on your monthly agenda packages for the regional actions, the multimodal agency activities, as well as any public engagement activities for transit or just general transportation projects. And then also your annual report for the state of the system with the transportation performance measures. The TPO was ahead of the curve. They are already tracking these things. And so that was kind of a best practice that we recommended to FHWA for the federal certification that the TPO went through, as well as we've mentioned it to other TPOs within our area because it is an important thing with the performance measures for the department to meet our performance measures as well for the TPO to meet their federal performance measures. And with that, I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Item 7C, the SCTPO Governing Board Fiscal Year 2020 to 2022 Draft Strategic Plan by Ms. Crum.
This is our last item, and I know that we're trying to keep our meetings at an hour and a half, so we'll try to move through this fairly quickly. Most of you are familiar with our staff strategic plan, and that plan lists staff priorities, programs, and the targets that we are required to hit. And these are programs from our Unified Planning Work Program. And this plan, the staff strategic plan, is also used in annual performance evaluations and also for the executive director as well. So we've been discussing for a couple of years about developing a board strategic plan. And a board-level strategic plan would help guide policy development and provide a clearer direction on emphasis areas. There are some MPOs that do this. You know, the board, you set the big picture, the framework for where we're going to go. And this will kind of help guide all the members of the board, as well as me as your director, on projects that we need to be programming, focus areas for the community as well. So we did present this draft plan to the executive committee on April the 11th, and they gave us a lot of good discussion, and after workshopping the plan, the executive committee agreed for us to present it to you. And the intent is to be a living document, and we can do minor adjustments as it's implemented. And as I said, this will be a part of my evaluation, and it'll be a 3-year plan. So it'll begin July 1 of 2019 through June 30th of 2022. And also in your attachments, you have the TPO's vision, mission, and core values, and that was adopted in November 10th, 2011. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you and let you kind of run through it.
Great, thank you, Georgiana. So I'm just, as Georgiana already mentioned, staff went through and we workshopped this and developed it, and then we presented to the executive committee and further workshopped and fine-tuned. We took all the recommendations from the executive committee back to the office and continued to tweak and really edit and get down and dirty on it. So what I wanted to do is just provide you guys with an overview. There is I'm not going to read off every single item on it, so you guys do have a 11 by 17 version at your station, as well as also an 11 by 17 of this chart as well. So let's get going. All right, so I just wanted to briefly go over the parts of the plan. And essentially the emphasis areas, which are the 5 across the top, are the focuses on where we want to make accomplishments in. They're the areas that we feel are at this time the most timely and sensitive, and the subjects that are currently rising to the surface. The goals are essentially what we want to achieve. Strategies are ways for us to accomplish those goals. The tactics are the tools, basically our little toolbox in each emphasis area. And then finally, the performance measure is our measurable way to actually see, did we accomplish the goal, or have we made progress in the goal? So there's our full plan. So just going to briefly go through each of the emphasis areas. So the first is safety. The goal of this emphasis area is to strive for a safe multimodal transportation system. As we all know, safety right now is a very important topic, as it should be and has always been for the TPO. Some strategies that we have included is to create a Vision Zero plan, as well as support safety initiatives through municipal directives and policies. So everyone working together as a community. Some of the tactics, there is a Safe School Access Committee already formed and meeting out there, as well as also continuing to monitor the safety data through the State of the System report. Finally, the performance measures that we're suggesting is a reduction in fatalities and crashes. What that specific number is, or that percentage, or what it is, we would like to refine through our Vision Zero plan. So eventually, as Georgiana mentioned, this is a living document. We'd like to actually tack some sort of measurable number to that tactic, or excuse me, that performance measure. And then, of course, the adoption of the Vision Zero plan by the locals. Our next emphasis area is to create a transportation network that complements existing and future land use. Essentially, this emphasis area recognizes that in order for us to build a purposeful transportation system and a meaningful community, we have to connect what we're doing in our lands as well as what we're doing on our roadways. So we need to marry those two to help build our community and transportation system. Some strategies that we've included is to support projects that improve access to tourist destinations. We actually met with the new tourism director yesterday. It was a very productive meeting. And to conduct the North Brevard Freight Study. Some of the tactics are incorporating transit-oriented development and also the adoption of the 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan, which will include some suggestions on the transit-oriented development possibilities and policies, a cost-feasible plan, and multimodal projects across the system. The performance measure is for local comprehensive plans to begin incorporating those recommendations of the 2045 LRTP land use policies into their comp plans. Our next one is to plan for a sustainable and resilient transportation system through our sustainability and resiliency emphasis area. This is one of the federal planning guidelines that we are required to be doing. We have to plan for resiliency as we're going through. That's via the FAST Act. And it's also an ever-increasing topic in planning, as I know multiple cities over this past year have been working on their comprehensive plans as far as adding in coastal elements and resiliency topics. So some of the strategies include projects that address resiliency in the long-range transportation plan, monitor evacuation routes in the State of the System report. Some of the tactics is to utilize the sea level rise vulnerability assessment we completed in February 2018. And then the implementation of the Regional Resiliency Action Plan that we adopted in, was that February or March? March. So, and then finally the performance measure is the adoption of a new planning tool that we're currently calling the Resiliency Master Plan. Might change and tweak as we move forward. And essentially over the next year we'll begin scoping what exactly that would look like. It could include further planning to develop a resilient transportation network against shocks and stressors such as storm events, sea level rise, evacuation routes, things like that. Our next emphasis area is innovation. The goal of this emphasis area is to enhance connectivity and reliability of the transportation system. With the continued growth in technologies and autonomous vehicles and the ITS system in general, we really need to focus on this emphasis area as we grow to have a more reliable transportation system via technology. Some strategies we suggested is participation and support of regional TSMO projects and activities, to maintain and update the Intelligent Transportation Systems Master Plan. We made our first step on that today with the consent agenda, with the scope being approved. And some tactics are to implement the ITS Master Plan, continue to provide SU funding to Brevard County for their ITS operations. The performance measure would be for the Transportation Management Center to be funded for construction by 2022. Finally, the last and, in my opinion, one of the most important emphasis areas is leadership, with the goal to serve as leaders in transportation and the community. As TPO board members, you are the leaders in transportation in your community. Some strategies we suggested are TPO members to report functions and activities to their local municipalities, to keep informed on relevant topics. Some tactics is promoting the TPO utilizing social media and e-newsletters, to attend the MPOAC Institute, with finally the performance measure to be implementing the board strategic plan. Something else that we developed was a TPO programs and strategic emphasis areas matrix, so that essentially you could see exactly how each of the emphasis areas line up with the products and programs and projects that the board is either already approving or already involved in, or has to approve or be involved in. So what are our next steps? First off, as we've mentioned several times, this is a living document, and changes and tweaks can be made as both the board and the organization continues to grow and develop. We plan to adopt the plan in July, and if you have any comments, edits, or suggestions, please provide them to staff by June 15th so that we can make those tweaks and edits for the July meeting. So,
All right.
any
All right.
What are your thoughts?
Very good. All right, any questions?
I'll ask it all tonight.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Crum.
Thank you.
And we were coming to the end. Do I have any sign-up sheets for public comments? All right, thank you. All right, next meeting will be in July 11th, 2019. That'll be at 1:30 at the Space Coast Room. That's Building C's second floor. So that's going to be a change. So if there's no other business, I will adjourn the meeting at 10:15.
Wow, good job, man.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.